what's up guys, my name is Ritish and today we're back with another tutorial after a very long time. And I have recently made this Rolex watch scene and I just thought that it would be cool to show you guys what it took to make the video. So let's just get started without wasting any more time, and we're in Blender's default setup, so let's delete everything and first of all import the 3D model which I found from cgtrader.com. As always, the link is in description box below. Rolex, and okay, once you're done importing, first thing you're not going to notice is that the model itself is quite big. You can definitely resize it. Alright, this is what you're going to get once it's all imported and resized. Let's go in the material preview. The materials of the model are quite off by default, so I'm just going to delete them and I'm going to give them materials myself. Select the parts where probably this material is being used, and that's basically the band. And now I'm going to create a new material and I'm going to assign it. I am going to name this metal, and I'm going to do the same with the rest of the model. Once you're done assigning the material, I'm just going to give it a metallic shader. Whatever looks good. I think I missed some parts, so that I'm just gonna give these a metal texture as well. Alright, just left with the dial, Control L, link materials. Alright, now this, of course, we want this part to be a glass shader, so I think I accidentally assigned metal shader to even the inside of the dial, which I of course don't want, so I'm just going to select this and I'm going to give this a basic white color shader. That's all, like something like that. Alright, so I'm going to assign a glass shader to this, since obviously we want some transparency there. And now if we go to the cycles rendering engine, we should be able to see that our model is almost nearly ready. Yeah, we're somewhat there. Let's switch it to GPU compute. Alright, just for the sake of the time, for visibility, I am increasing this to white. This is definitely not the final lighting. Alright, transparent. Now we're done with pretty much the model. Let's start working on the environment. And if you couldn't tell already, the environment is basically inspired from, or has been pretty much ripped off from, CG Geek. I had followed this tutorial to make the Nebula like structure. You can definitely watch this video from CG Geek to get to know how the nebulas were made in much more detail. So to make the environment, let's start with a cube. Let's resize it so it engulfs the whole object, and let's assign a material to it. Now let's go to the shading tab, delete the default principal BSTF, and let's look for volume, principal volume. Alright, now we have to wire this to volume, not volume to surface, because volume to surface just does not work. And if you connect it to volume to volume, you will see there is already some fog, some foggish sort of thing that's happening. Especially you will be able to see it in cycles. Alright, now what we need to do to create these nebula like structures is we need some kind of node which tells the cube, or whatever this is, the deformations in the cloud. So fortunately that has been done for us already, and I will be making sure that I'll link this in the description box below. You will also find the same in CG Geek's tutorial which I followed to make this. So it's a blend file, and you will find this exact thing when you open the file. What you need is this specific node named noise2. Since I didn't know any better way to, or a faster way to basically copy paste this node, I am just being very lazy in my research and I'm copying the object itself and I'm pasting it in the scene. and I'm gonna resize it so you can see it. Now if I go to this, and I just have to copy this node and basically just paste it to my cube. That easy. It's a little lazy, and it's a little not so appropriate way to do this, but who cares, as long as you're getting the results. Alright, so once you connect it to the density of the cube, what you're going to see is that basically nothing happens. And why there is nothing happening is because there is no alpha map which tells where the nebulas are supposed to be there. So that's what we're going to do with the color ramp node. And if I basically just crush the values of black and whites, maybe you're going to see some cloudy, some weird shapes are being formed, and these can be tweaked up by changing these values. All right, now you can just play around with these settings and see what works for you, but I'm just going to skip to what I ended up with at the last. Alright, so this is what we have so far, and to visualize our scene better, I am going to turn off this default world light, and I'm going to make a light of my own. Let's create a point light and place it somewhere wherever you want, and increase the radius, and let's give it some crazy value. Alright, let's see what it does. So it's affecting some part of it. And also let's disable our transparent in film so we get a much better idea of what it's looking like right now. Alright, that looks quite scary. So first thing we need to do is definitely increase the radius and maybe give it even a much more crazier value, since the cube is quite big. Now let's create a camera. And once you're done, let's place the camera to somewhere nice. So Control Alt 0 to just nab the camera to wherever you like. Select the camera, viewport display, and let's just maximize the passport out so we do not see any of the nonsense that's happening outside. Alright, if I go in the rendered view now, let's see what happens, what's visible. Alright, that we're getting there, but it's still far off. Now first thing I'm going to do is change the light color to some spacey color. I have a specific hex code which I want to go with, so that's what I'm going to go with. And maybe decrease the radius a little bit. Now you can already see that we're quite already there with the nebulas. It's just a matter of placement of the light and just tweaking the light value, the color, and making more lights. So now you already have this really cool silhouette of what looks like a nebula. Before we proceed any further, I'm also going to add a math node, and let's change this to multiply and give it a value of like 10, let's say. So this basically affects the density of your nebula. So if I reduce this to 0.1, you're going to see that the more you increase the value, the denser your nebulas get. So let's give it 10. So for my lighting, I just basically want two things. One light has to highlight some of this part of the watch, and the other light is supposed to light up the front part of the watch, and that's all. So let's create one area light and let's resize it, and let's place it in an angle which just basically highlights the dial which says Rolex. Let's see what it's doing right now. Let's increase the value, and that's looking quite sweet. Let's decrease the spread so the beam is almost gonna act like a spotlight rather than an area light. And I'm going to change the light color to again a hex code I have. Yeah, and maybe increase the value to, let's say, 5000. And now I want one light which basically just highlights the front, the glass, and like where the main dial is. So let's just duplicate this light and place it here. Okay, that's a way too bright for my liking. I'm going to decrease the spread even further. And maybe I don't want it to hit the dial very in the face, but maybe like a nice touch to the side. That's looking much better. The next thing that I'm going to do is create the stars in the scene. So to do that, let's create an icosphere and let's reduce the subdivisions to only one, because there are going to be probably tens of thousands of stars in the cube. Let's select the cube after you're done making the icosphere. Go in the particle section, add particles, go in hair. Okay, go in rendered, object, and select the icosphere. And right off you're going to see that the actual particles are on the surface of the cube and not inside the cube. So that's not what we want. Let's go to source and change emit from faces to volume. And right off you are going to see that the icospheres are now inside the cube. And let's give the icosphere an emission shader and maybe increase the value to 10. And there you go, we have stars in the scene now. So they are a bit too big to my liking, so let's reduce the size by going in the particle settings, and in render let's reduce the scale, and let's also randomize scale, maybe a value of 0.02, something like that. Maybe that looks nice. You can tweak around and see what works for you. So already we're getting quite nice results. It's just a matter of tweaking the lights and maybe finding a better camera angle. Another thing I'm going to do is change the absorption color of the volume shader to red, to something red, because I want some nice red tint to the overall scene, which gives this purple vibe when mixed with the lighting. So after a lot of tweaking with the light and the camera angle, this is what I ended up with. Now that's looking quite sweet, and I think we're pretty much there. Now comes probably the most important part of the shot, which is these waves that appear in the scene, and which basically gives this shot so much life, and probably also the reason why you decided to watch this tutorial. This is something that I've also used in different advertisement that I made for a brand called Redgear. For that, basically I had looked up for stock footage, and you can just search Aura stock footage on YouTube, and this is the footage that I ended up using. Now I had edited this quite a bit, since for the advertisement that I made for Redgear, it required it to have 4 different colors, so I edited it in After Effects, and I basically just added these 4 colors and I added this glow. Now the most important thing is the revealing factor. So by default this footage is just going to be playing like this. So I wanted these nebulas to almost somehow appear in the scene and not already be present in the scene. So I just made like a mask in After Effects, and I've just keyframed the mask so that it looks like it is appearing in the scene. And now I'll make sure that I provide this footage again. The link is in the description box below, and I'm going to be using this exact footage to create those waves that you see that provide so much life in the animation. Now let's import that as an image plane, And if you are not getting this option by default, then what you need to do is go in your preferences, edit preferences, add-ons, and search for image planes, and just basically check mark this. Now let's import the footage as a plane. Once you have the footage, let's resize it and let's see how it's looking by default. Well, it's not really very clearly visible, but you can somewhat see what it's doing. Let's go to the shading tab. And the first thing I'm going to do is plug the color value in emission, and all of a sudden you see the footage comes to life. You can increase the value of emission, maybe 10. That's pretty crazy. The possibilities with image planes is pretty insane, and endless opportunity to just create amazing visuals out of this. Let's resize this to a place which I want. Maybe I want the waves to come from right there. Now, since these waves are just in insane abundance and they are eating up the visibility of these nebula like structures, I'm going to add a color ramp node. First, I'm going to cut off this connection from alpha to alpha, and I'm going to use the color information with alpha instead. Already that makes an insane amount of difference, and if you want to play further, I'm going to add a color ramp node, and I'm going to squeeze the values further down. It's up to you what you feel is working for you. So I don't think I need to reduce this any bit, but let's just leave this here in case we need it. And if you just like the colors as they are, that's completely fine, but since I want to change the colors to my liking, I'm going to add another color ramp node, and I'm going to place it right between the color to emission. And as always, I have hex codes for both the values. And you can already see we're pretty much honestly done, and all we just need is to animate the camera and see how it's looking. So this is what the effect is at the moment. If I just zoom out, I feel it's a bit too much, and that's why I am going to probably play with some values. Maybe cramp up this value just a little bit, and maybe decrease the emission strength to 5. Let's see how that looks. Alright, that's looking quite cool. Another thing that I'm going to do is animate the emission strength of the whole image plane and any lights present in the scene, so it looks like the watch is being visible as you saw in the video. So I'll just do that. Let's go to the shading tab, and I am going to add a keyframe to emission strength at about 30th frame, and I'm going to again shading tab to 0 and add another keyframe, and I'm going to do the same thing with this light which is making this whole watch visible in the scene. And let's do the same thing with this point light that we have, which is basically emitting on the nebula clouds and which is giving all the character to the clouds that there are. Let's see how this is looking now. And as you can see, we're pretty much already done. Another cool thing that you can do with image planes is actually deform the geometry as you like. So that's something that I ended up doing in the final scene. I'm just going to show very briefly how I did it. Let's go in the edit mode and subdivide it, and let's give it 10 subdivisions. And what I'm going to do is now deform the mesh to my liking so that it sort of makes a C around the watch rather than just a flat plane. So that provides it with a lot more depth. Let's see how that probably looks. I'm going to make sure that this origin of waves is always around here. So let's do that. Somewhere around there. Make sure that the deformation doesn't seem unnatural in any way. And let's go in rendered view now. That's looking much nicer. Now all that you're left with is animating the camera and render it out. So for animation, I'm going to make a circle, resize it so that it basically matches where the camera is. Position it right where the camera is, and before parenting the camera to the circle, I'm going to make sure that the origin of my circle matches the center of my model where I want all my attention of the camera to be. Now I'm going to parent the camera to the circle, and if I go in my camera view now and if I scale the circle, it basically makes my life so much easier because the focus always stays on the model. Now all I need to do is animate. Now since I want the animation to start with a burst, so I'm going to go to the animation settings, graph editor, which we are already in, and I'm going to play with this graph and I'm going to squeeze in as much speed there is at the very initial, and the graph sort of just slows down and smooths over as it passes, something like that. That's maybe a bit too much. Yeah, something like that looks pretty good. And I'm also going to add a keyframe to the rotation because I do not want it to be just stiffly straight in the scene. I want some constant rotation happening. Very subtle, but yeah, maybe something like that. Play around and see what looks good for you, and maybe position it much better in the scene, maybe in the center. Let's see how that's looking. That's very close to what I had in the final render. And lastly, one issue that you're going to face is if you animate this out right now, you will notice that the stars that you have created in your scene will start falling, and it might look cool for some scenes, but if that's something that you want to avoid, just make sure that you go in your world properties before rendering and you deselect gravity, and then go in your particle settings as well, just to double check, and go in field weights and make the gravity to 0. And now you're just basically ready to render this out and see how it looks. So once you're done rendering, all you're left with is just adding some nice color correction to this. Share it on your social media and tag me, and I would love to see what you create with this. You can also check out some of my work on my website, and you can follow me on all of my social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Behance, etc. And if you have any other suggestions for me to make a tutorial on, then please share them in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.